one of the things that we do in Congress that maybe most people don't realize is we provide oversight. I mean, the check and the balance on the federal government is supposed to happen. We keep changing it, I can tell. All right. We're supposed to provide the oversight of the executive branch. It's part of our duty, part of our responsibility. It's very interesting to me how sometimes some people say, oh, you're just trying to do this for politics. No, we're supposed to be providing the check and the balance. We're supposed to be inquisitive. We're supposed to challenge things. It's how you get better. You know, we as a nation are different from most because we are self-critical. That's how you improve. And it's amazing to me about how many people are so willing to leave executive power unchecked. They just, how quickly they abandon that whole principle. When it was George W. Bush, they wanted it, you know. But now that it's Barack Obama, oh no, we don't want any, don't do any of that over here, you know. You guys, you can't touch this guy. I like getting in the fight. I like stirring the pot. I like getting in the middle of it. It doesn't bother me, you know. They say, oh, well, we're going to do this. Go ahead. I don't work for you. I don't report to you. The people I serve, the people that elected me, they're in Utah. In Utah's 3rd district. So that's been the approach. It's why I focused from the very beginning to get involved in the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. There are 22 committees in Congress. This committee is unique in that it has no bounds to its jurisdiction. Minus 2 things. One is on intelligence, sources, and methods. There's a select group of people within the Congress that look at sources and methods. That is the actual person's name. And then some of the intelligence capabilities this group looks at. I can't get into that. They see the same intelligence report that the president sees. I have the next layer down, which is pretty darn close, but it is a little bit different. The other thing that we have done is since the attacks in Benghazi, where we lost 4 Americans who were murdered by terrorists, we are looking at the whole spectrum of what's happening there with terrorism, embassy security, and that falls within our bailiwick. So again, no bounds to jurisdiction on oversight and government reform. I was the subcommittee chairman for national security. But then as I took on, and I ran for and won, became the chairman of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. We have 6 different subcommittees, but one of the things we're looking deeply at is embassy security. You know, we spend probably close to $700 billion between the Department of Defense, state, USAID, all these other programs. We have literally thousands and thousands of Americans serving overseas. And I can tell you without exception, every embassy I have ever gone to, inevitably there is somebody from Utah who is serving me. You know, one of the things I'm deeply concerned about, which is totally different than what Barack Obama and certainly Secretary Kerry would lead you to believe. You know, Secretary Kerry in the last, 10 days, 2 weeks, who said the world's safer than it's been before, is safer than ever. I mean, are you kidding me? Since I was elected at the same time as Barack Obama, so that's my gauge here. I'm still fairly new to this, but, you know, since the president has taken office, we've had to abandon, flee, evacuate 4 different facilities in the Middle East. At the same time, our Secretary of State is trying to say, well, we should trust Iran, and you know, it's safer than it's ever been, so, you know, no worries. We had to flee after terrorist attacks in Benghazi. We had to abandon Tripoli. We're no longer in Tripoli. We had to flee in Syria. And most recently in Yemen, where we had a physical presence. Remember the president in September 2014 said, this is the model of success. Well, we just ran out of there with our tail between our legs and almost lost 129 Americans who had to lay down their weapons as they fled. You know what's interesting about this? 2 of those 3 countries were being served by ambassadors who graduated from Brigham Young University. BYU graduates that were serving in those capacities. When Ambassador Stevens in Libya was killed, the person that was put in his place is a woman who's a graduate of Brigham Young University. And the ambassador in Yemen is a gentleman who actually has a home in this valley. And I won't tell you which city, because we kind of tried not to let the bad guys know exactly and precisely where this person's home is. He's still in danger's way. He still has a fairly in-depth security profile, but he lives in this valley. He grows up here and has kids here and goes to BYU football games and the whole bit. And so I went and traveled to Mozambique, and went to Zimbabwe, and went to South Africa, and met about a dozen people that are from Utah. Payson, Roy, Toof, I think, from West Jordan. I mean, it was really, really neat experience to see these people. I cannot justify it. It's part of the reason I was down there. We have about 2,000 employees between those three countries. 2,000. That's, I mean, why? I don't get it. If you look at Zimbabwe and Mozambique, and then you combine in South Africa, we're spending probably close to $700 million. $700 million. And that's, I mean, it's an amazing amount of money that's going out the door for embassies and for help with health projects and AIDS. And I can't justify the number. I can't. It's one of my big frustrations. When we're dealing with massive debt and problems and challenges in our own backyard, and you just look at, well, you know, we give, you know, there in Harare, to the government there, you know, we, basically a dictator, we hand over about $130 million or so just in aid. That doesn't count all the people and personnel and local hires and embassy builds. And then they're giving us a problem about, we're having a permitting problem to get our embassy built. Are you kidding me? It's just, it's very frustrating. So I could go more in depth on that stuff, but really what I want to do is open it up and answer the questions that you have.
You talked about deficits, and you've at various times talked about this before. We've discussed it. We sit here in Utah with what I now believe may be the richest piece of property on the earth in terms of resources and value, that if it were produced, even a smidgen of it might literally be able to pay off that federal deficit. How are we moving forward to release at least part of those lands? And I'll just say the Escalante staircase. It's at least 2 Saudi Arabias, and it's only a third drilled. So how do we get those back to the state?
Okay. Thank you, appreciate it, because it makes a big point. And I really do believe that our future, whoever can figure out how to fuel the future, will be the dominant global power in the world. We happen to, as you said, have this mass array of resources that are right here in our own backyard. And I'm kind of, quite frankly, getting tired of these radical environmentalists that in the name of, you know, who knows what, you know, woodpeckers, just don't want us to be energy independent. I happen to believe that we should pursue all of the above. Coal, natural gas, petroleum, wind, solar, geothermal, I mean, you name it, okay, let's do it. Now, do it in a responsible way, right? We're not going to go drill down in the, you know, arches and all that, but there's got to be a balance here, okay? And I don't believe it's a zero-sum game where it's one extreme or the other, okay? Now, there's 2 paths that are going on. The state has things that it can do. There's some discussion from some of our state representatives about a lawsuit talking about the Enabling Act that makes a lot of sense. I'm not an attorney. You can applaud that part if you want, but I'm not an attorney. That seems to make a lot of sense. But it's going to take years to play out. The legislature is going to need to fund it, and hopefully they prevail. But let's pretend that they don't. We would be wrong to just sit back and say, well, we'll just see what happens. So we have undergone a process, and Rob Bishop's leading it out. You know, Rob Bishop, congressman from the 1st Congressional District, he's got points north out to the Uinta Basin, Daggett County, that sort of thing. Rob is now the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee. So a lot of these land issues fall into his bailiwick. He's the Committee of Authorization, as they call it. He and I are joined in putting forward this plan. It's called the Public Lands Initiative, the PLI. And we have gone through this for more than a year. We have had literally, this is not some, you know, exaggerate, more than 1,000 meetings at every level that you can think of with everybody in the room. From some of these more, you know, SUA and some of these other kind of radical, I call them environmentalists. I tell them when they're sitting here, and if they're here, I tell them again, to over here to people who just want to drill and open up everything, okay? And we've tried to have everybody in the room, trying to come up with a win-win in a bottom-up solution. So in the 3rd Congressional District, we're talking about San Juan County, which is right Blanding and that surrounding area, Monticello. Grand County, which I think Moab. Emory County, okay, Castledale, and they're clapping away. And then Carbon County, Price, Helper. So those 4 counties, we've worked as best we could from the bottom up. And we're now introducing, or getting ready to introduce, the base bill. And this is the way this is going to work. We're trying to trade something here, trying to make a deal that creates this win-win. They did this in Wyoming, and they did this in Alaska. You know, the tool that the president has at his fingertips is called the Antiquities Act. The stroke of a pen, a president can take federal land and designate it wilderness, like that. And by the way, I don't think most people understand what wilderness is. I think we've got a bit of an education to do here. Wilderness, my guess is you went up to the average person who's really not, you know, necessarily politically involved. That's fine, it's their choice. And you said, do we need more wilderness? They would say, oh yeah, it'd be great, because, you know, I'd love to get my wife and kids and go down there and ride some motorcycles and, you know, go hiking and climbing, ride some bikes. That'd be awesome. Let's have more of that. Let's have more wilderness. That's not wilderness. You can't even ride a bike on wilderness. Or walk. I mean, wilderness is, you can't do that. There's this thing where they're trying to say that you can't go in and do photographs and put them up on the internet. I mean, it's unbelievable what wilderness truly means. So there are legal definitions that we're trying to get around here. But nevertheless, what we're trying to do is to create more wilderness in the lower 48, or the continental United States, than we ever have in the history of the United States. But in return, we're going to get rid of the Antiquities Act in those counties. Because the president, with a stroke of pen, can just do it. If you live in Emory County, San Juan, Grand, the president could wake up in 10 minutes and sign this thing, and it's a monument. And that's what happened in Grand Staircase. And there are literally hundreds of years of coal in these places. Hundreds. And it's not anything to take a picture and write, you know, send it mom. I promise you. But it's very energy rich. And so what we try to do is create certainty. And that's when I go and I talk down to people in southern Utah. Certainty. They are constantly living under this aura of a lawsuit. They are constantly living under this threat of a monument that could change their livestock grazing permits, that could, I mean, you just wipe people out. People have been there for generations. And so I will give credit to Secretary Jewell and to the administration in holding off, because I really do believe that the only reason the president hasn't done this in Utah is because we have been working in a collaborative, bipartisan way to create certainty, get some designated wilderness, but also get these energy corridors and get certainty in the picture and make sure that there's these grazing and everything else is already mapped out. And that takes a long time. So we're hopeful here in the next few weeks that we'll have sort of the base bill, and then we're going to go back to each county and say, we want you to participate in this, but we need your vocal support in favor. I'm not there to come force it upon you. And the hope is that with the 7 counties, I named 4 in mine, 3 in Rob Bishop's district, that we can create this model that isn't just a land deal, but that creates this certainty, changes the paradigm, and shifts this thing so that it isn't locked up in perpetual lawsuits. I mean, I guess people can keep, you know, suing each other, but people can develop the energy they want to develop. Wilderness will be designated. A lot of it's wilderness anyway, no matter what you do with it. You aren't going there. And create this window. So that's what we're trying to do. Congressman Stewart and Mia Love have been fabulous and very supportive of this. I think that same model can also work as we look, particularly in Chris Stewart's district. He's got a lot of southern Utah there. But that's what we're trying to do. We can fuel the future. It is some of the best paying jobs in our state. But you've got to have certainty, otherwise investors will not make the investments necessary. So.
I'm concerned about the Fourth Amendment and the loss of my rights.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know, but in the news recently, it's come out that Samsung smart TVs can actually record what you say in your home, and things like that, and it's transmitted to a third party, or it can be. And it says that in the owner's manual. And are you aware of that? Yeah. And also, I feel that's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. And I was wondering your take on that. And also, is all this information that is illegally taken from the American people stored at the data center at the point of the mountain?
Okay. You bring up some great points. So yes, good lamb, that's good. Number two, Fourth Amendment, the unreasonable search and seizure. Boy, we could do a couple hours on just that point. Technology's great, but I worry about the pervasive nature and nefarious characters getting in there and doing things with it. And I worry about our federal government because I don't trust them. And they may say, oh, well, you know, we're going to, it's for your good. I think one of the big questions that's facing this generation, because I don't think we can answer it by, the end of March, but is how much liberty are we willing to give up in the name of security? And I differ from a lot of my colleagues because I'm not willing to give it up. You know, they want to surveil you all the time. And let me tell you a certain part of this. So in terms of the smartphones, like if you have a camera on your phone or your TV, I don't care what it is, your computer, people can turn that on remotely. I don't even care if it's plugged in or not. Okay? They have the ability, the technology exists to break that air barrier, they call it, and flip it on and you would never know. Can they record what you're saying, doing? Yes, they can. The Chinese do it. People can do this. One of the big fights that's going on in Washington, D.C. right now is about encryption. In fact, I'm trying to get the senior people at some of the technology companies to come testify, but they're a little worried about that. It works like this, because I had I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I had the president of Apple come to sit with me and spend 30, 40 minutes with me. And he sat and explained, for instance, on iPhones and all the Apple products. And if you go back, there's a 60-minute story that the FBI director said. It was interviewed, talked about this encryption issue. Basically, and it's not just true with Apple, it's true with everybody, okay? Samsung, doesn't matter. They can build you a phone that comes encrypted, where you put in that code, that little number that you put in. They can do that, and you can't break it. You cannot go to the Genius Bar and have somebody say, oh, okay, you forgot your code, I can unlock it. Because in order for them, if they were to build something that could unlock it, the government could do that, organized crime, you name it, hackers around the world. It could be some dude in a van down by the river for all you know, okay, that can unlock this. So the question is, our law enforcement, the most senior level, the FBI, they don't want these phones encrypted. Why? Because if they got something going down, they want to track it. And they don't want to have to ask you. Now, I err on the side of, sorry fellas, you're going to have to figure it out. Do it the old-fashioned way. We haven't always had mobile phones, so you're going to have to go figure it out. But I'm in favor of encryption. I just think we got a duty to protect the 330 million people out there. And it's tough going to find 1,000 bad ones, right? But I think, what kind of phone do I want my wife to use? What kind of phone do I want to use? I want one that's encrypted. If Apple can't break into the Apple phone, that's the one I want. But the FBI is pushing back, saying no. I'll give you one other example, then we'll have to kind of keep going. I have a bill called the GPS Act. So, remember, the government argued that metadata, the connection between me and you, if I sent you an email, the government has argued that's okay. That's just metadata. It doesn't tell me anything other than, I'm sorry, what's your first name?
Chris.
Chris and Jason are communicating. That's all it's telling me. That's metadata. That's fair game, that's no harm, no foul. We should be able to collect that. So my question to him was, and I've asked the FBI director, I've asked the Attorney General, I've asked the Deputy Attorney General, none of them will answer this because I know the answer. And that is, what about geolocation? What about your GPS coordinates? Your car, your phone, your computer, your television. You name it now, it pretty much comes with a GPS device on it. Or a triangulation ability. There are different ways to, it's not all cellular, it's not all GPS. There are other ways to triangulate somebody's whereabouts. So, The question then becomes, if I could tell where Chris is 24/7, should I be able to do that? Should I be able to follow him? Because if I could tell you the whereabouts, he said no. If I could tell where he's going, what he's doing, I would argue that that is not metadata. That's content. That's like reading your emails, right? But they won't answer that question. They will, because they know they're fundamentally totally wrong on this. If you look, the ACLU actually did a great survey. They went to counties all across the country, got a sampling of them. Some counties track every resident 24/7. They can tell, they can turn it on and tell everybody in this room you could disperse and I could tell you exactly where you are within a few feet. It's that pervasive. There are other counties that say, no, you need a probable cause warrant. If you're going to track me in my location, you're going to have to go get a warrant. That's where I'm at. And I've done this with Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat out of Oregon. We have this, what's called the GPS Act, and it basically says you need a probable cause warrant. You know, you got a missing mother with a young child, and you don't know it? Of course, for emergency purposes, of course, we're going to flip that switch on and go find it. But to track everybody all the time, it's kind of creepy. Now, let's go to the NSA facility up at the Point of Mountain. I'm glad we have that there. I do distinguish the difference between our international intelligence gathering capabilities and operations and what we're doing domestically. If you're a suspicionless American, I don't believe the government has any right whatsoever to track your whereabouts. Period. You just don't. If you are under suspicion, then there are different ways to go from articulable suspicion up to probable cause. There are other things. Our law enforcement guys can explain this all to everybody. But to track everybody 24/7 is too much. Now, internationally, I promise you, having seen a lot of this intelligence, you want the NSA, you want the CIA, you want all these other things that you don't even know are out there to understand exactly what's happening in Iran, exactly what's happening in Syria, exactly what's happening in China. Is some of that stored at the Point of the Mountain? Perhaps. What's going on at the data center, and I've taken a tour, I've had classified briefings on this. They're servers, they're storage units. They darn well not be tracking Americans in that. But on the international side, yeah, it's a big part of what they do up there. And there are a lot of good people in counterintelligence and others that support that effort. But if you want to know what's really going on in Iran, if we want to know what's really happening in Venezuela, then the men and women who serve, and I'm telling you, there's a disproportionate number of Utahns doing this. God bless them, more power to them. You're going to have to store that data. You watch 24 and some of these other shows, and I tell you, sometimes you walk into a room and you think, oh my goodness, we actually do this? Wow, it's impressive. And it's saved countless lives. And but let's not be going and blaming a building or a server. There's very few people that actually work there. And their servers, it's one of the more safe places in the planet. It's on the interior. There are a lot of counterintelligence reasons to have it there. Good supply of energy and water. But I'd be mad at the process. I'm mad about the process. What goes in it and what gets extracted out of it. So the question is about Homeland Security, the people who come across illegal. I mean, look, every state has a cross-section of people that are here illegally. It's hard to tell because you don't necessarily get data, and some of them come for different reasons in different places. Okay, there was this surge of kids that came across the border because basically they were told they were going to get amnesty, and there was going to be no repercussion. There was going to be no enforcement of the deportation. Here's the number that I think is probably fairly representative of how many we have in Utah, at least it's a guess, is our state did something that we give people who are here illegally driver's licenses. So you can go look and count how many driver's licenses did we hand out. That's over 100,000. So now that's just a subsection, right? Not everybody who comes here illegally is going to get a driver's license, but you may have head of household or somebody, or maybe two of them get driver's licenses. I think we were a magnet. I think we were bringing people in from other states who said, Utah's easy. We were one of the easiest states in the nation to get driver's licenses. It's just wrong. we're still continuing with an investigation. I'm going to beg off and tell you there's more to that to come, but our committee is looking at it. It's a very serious problem. We've had two, I think it's at least two, if not three, secretaries of state, Kansas and Ohio. Now, how important is Ohio in the presidential election? The Secretary of State came and said, these driver's licenses that y'all handed out, this is a problem. This is a real problem. I can't tell. Our people can't tell who's legal and who's not. They get a driver's license. So they're different. They'll say, oh, it's a different color. It's a different type. But there's some real problems with the databases and how they're checked and security. Hang in there with me. So I don't know how to give you a count. It's fundamentally wrong. I'm opposed to amnesty. It's just not. We got to fix legal immigration.
So on that question,
Yeah.
I mean, you're the oversight committee. Is there intent behind all this?
To subvert the law? I mean, yes. I would say yes.
Is there intent to use illegal immigration pools to switch the election? Is that what you're
I
saying?
cannot point to a specific document or person who says, this is our intention. It's the consequence. And don't take my word. I looked at the secretaries of state who are there to determine voter rolls in their states. Our committee is the one that had this hearing about this. And so we got at least 2 states. I think there's a third one that's joined in that mix. And it's really a question we have for all the states. How are you guarding? How are you protecting the voter rolls? Now, our state doesn't feel it nearly as much as you see in the South and the Midwest. But it gets darn right nasty about, can you or can you not use some form of ID? A lot of states, you don't even have to have identification in order to get on the voter rolls. So it's a big problem. I'm glad that we've already, in my first 8 weeks, we already had a hearing about this, and we'll have some more. But can I point to some high-level government official who said, I'm doing X to create Y? No, but that is the consequence. Trey Gowdy is perhaps, he is the greatest. I'm telling you, I love Trey Gowdy. He and I go to dinner 2 to 3 times a week. I've only been back in this country for less than 12 hours. I've already spoken to him 4 times today. Okay, I'm on judiciary with Trey. I'm on oversight and government reform with Trey. And he was selected to lead the Benghazi Select Committee. He's a former prosecutor. He's amazing background. And I think he's prosecuted more than 100 cases. I think 7 were capital murder cases. He's never lost a case, ever. He is the most articulate, decent human being. I could stay here all night and just laud compliments on it. And I tell you, to be away from your family is a hard thing. But the idea that I get to go spend a couple hours every day with Trey is just the greatest thing in my life. I mean, I just love it, and I love him. Remember how Benghazi started, okay? I'm going to tell you part of this story. It is a little bit longer, but I want you to know it. And I haven't told many people this, so this is probably new. No problem. That's our fire department. I trust them. So, he turned that volume up. Oh, I haven't heard this before. Okay, Hillary, let me explain to you how this thing went down. The attacks happened in Benghazi. We start to hear some feedback. And then something very interesting happened. I got to kind of skip or it'll take me an hour. Days into this, we had a gentleman who came in who sent an email to us. I get about 10,000 emails and letters a month. And we hire interns, and we try to teach them as best you can, look for this, look for that. And this girl, less than 3 weeks on our staff, got an email, and she said, I think the congressman ought to read this. And it was somebody from our Utah National Guard. Colonel Wood took that time to write and express his concern because he had served in Libya up until, I think, August, just shortly before the attack. He had gone to a couple senators and a couple other members, and they hadn't seen anything. It never returned his call. So finally he came to me. I happened to be his hometown congressman, and I very quickly said to my wife, I need to get with this guy. And this was Sunday. I happened to go to church, but I said, Julie, I gotta we have a SCIF, a secure communication facility up at the point of the mountain, the National Guard. So I called the general, said, I need to meet with your colonel, and we need to have a discussion. We spent a few hours going through that, and then I got off the phone and called Daryl Issa and said, I want to go to Libya. And that's not a fun conversation you have with your wife. I'm going to go to Libya, 19 days after the attack. And so literally started driving up to the airport, didn't know where I was going, which flights I was on. They just said, just get there, we'll give you a ticket. Flew to Paris, flew to Stuttgart, met with General Ham, who's the 4-star general in charge of Operation AFRICOM, which included Libya. Flew down to Libya, wouldn't let me spend the night, came back, and there were obviously problems. And that was really the start of the Benghazi investigation. I ended up going again to Libya. I'd say I probably know as much about Benghazi as anybody. I brought Trey along the way. Speaker basically came to me and Trey and said, you got a choice here. You can potentially lead the Benghazi committee, but I really think Trey's probably better to do that. And if you want to become the chairman of the oversight committee, you can't do both. And I wanted to be the chairman of the oversight committee. And so Trey's now that, and I'm his counterpart. That investigation never stopped and never slowed down. There is so much that happens every day behind the scenes that you never see. And Trey's a smart guy, okay? You can do what are transcribed interviews. You can do closed-door depositions. You can do a variety of things to build your case and understand without letting without letting the next person know what that person testified to. I have flown and met Trey in other states to interview people on 24 hours there and back, going to these different states, meeting with these individuals, building that case. The temptation is, let's get the Secretary of State, let's get Susan Rice, it's going to happen. But Trey, as a former federal prosecutor, knows you build the case from the bottom up, and then you bring in your star witnesses because you're working from a set of facts that's not just found in some newspaper. And that is happening. They've had several of these, most of which you've never read about. Bipartisan, Democrats are there in equal force. That's why they're complaining about it. The whole reason we know that the Hillary email problem is there is because Trey Gowdy pushed them and started to find those emails. And then he knew about it for a few weeks before it was actually released. And here we are. It's one of the biggest news stories there is. And it wasn't as if she just decided to be magnanimous about it and release these emails out of the goodness of her heart. It's because Trey Gowdy and the Select Committee forced their hand. And there's a lot more of that coming. There's a lot more of that coming. So I hope that answers.
Okay, then now the second question.
Oh. That was the easy one, wasn't it? So, for a long time I was very frustrated with Harry Reid because he wouldn't bring up certain things. This is the question about Republicans and leadership. And there's a couple different levels when you have an administration overstep their bounds. One of those is the power of the purse and holding back appropriations. The other thing that you can do is go to, when there's conflict between the executive and the legislative branch, you go to the judicial branch. The problem with that is it takes so long. Now, some of that's happening, like fast and furious, that's happening. There are lawsuits, and we keep winning them, but we're not yet to the final part of it. It's happening Obamacare. It's happening on several different fronts, but it's slow. It's slow, and the president knows it. I don't care, hopefully we got some people here that aren't, not necessarily from the same party I am. I want people to participate and feel welcome at these no matter where you are on the political spectrum. But wherever you are on the political spectrum, it should scare all of us that you have a president who would ever even utter the words, let alone repeatedly say them over and over and over again. Well, Congress doesn't do its job, so I have to do it, and I'm just going to use my pen and start stroking these executive orders. Since Barack Obama took office until now, there have been 13,049 rules that have been issued. That's actually less than what Bush was doing. Doesn't mean it's right. Does not mean it's right. So my Democratic colleagues, I say, well, you were complaining about Bush, and I'm complaining about Obama. It's not right. And as I said earlier, it's amazing how many people are so willing to give up and cede power to the executive unchallenged. It really does scare me. So we're doing something in our committee to actually highlight these problems. You try to shine sunlight on it and knock it down before you could possibly do it, and I can give you lots of examples of that. One of the challenges that I see out there to accomplishing what I think I want to achieve and you want to achieve is the United States Senate. And I don't want you all to think that's just easy for me to point to the Senate because I'm in the House. But they have this 60 vote threshold. And this is a Mitch McConnell problem. It drives me nuts when Mitch McConnell stands up and says, no, we will never shut down the government. No, we will not do it. You've already shown your hand. The president knows you're going to fold like a deck of cards. Just bring it to the deadline. You said you're not going to do it anyway, so you don't operate in a position of power. I'll give you another example, the immigration issue. 22 times, the president says, I don't have the power or the authority to do this. And then he wakes up and says, oh, well, I'm going to do it anyway. No, I'm just going to go ahead and do that. The appropriations funding that they put together tied this to Homeland Security, and the speaker and others said, well, we're never going to shut down Homeland Security. I don't want to do that. Tie it to EPA. And then the president will know we're serious and we'll walk away from the table, right?
They need to stop him. The Republicans need to stop him on that, though. How come they don't?
We need the majority of people to do that. And we're not quite there. Even though we have control in the House, we did some things. First 10 days, we actually passed in the House of Representatives a bill that all of our delegation voted for to repeal that funding and change the language. It's important. There's two parts to this because unfortunately, the autopilot that is in Homeland Security, whether or not the appropriations bill passed last year, the funding was still going to continue. It was still going to happen. So we needed a new bill that we did in the first 10 days of January, passed, and then Mitch McConnell sat on it, got to the very end of February, could not get over the 60 vote threshold, the cloture vote. They have to get a procedural motion passed, which requires 60 senators to say, we'll bring it forward. And then they fold it like a deck of cards, and it drives me nuts. So part of it is using the judicial branch, it's slow. Part of it is the funding mechanism, which I think we've gotten better at, but still have not perfected. In the Senate, you're going to have to get Senator Lee, and who's irate about this as well, and Orrin Hatch in here, to answer the Senate part of the equations. And then you have to follow that process through, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating to me. It's very frustrating. So. Yes, sir.
Did Boehner also fold on that?
In many ways, yeah, he did. Let me talk about Boehner. Anybody like my vote on Boehner for Speaker? No. Yeah, okay. Just keep your hands down. It's okay. You don't have to say that rhetorically. Hold your applause, please. Let me tell you about why I voted for John Boehner for Speaker. You have to understand a little bit of background about this. First of all, the election for Speaker is your party's nomination happens in November. Now, keep in mind the context of November. We just came off a huge win. We grew to our levels to 247. We have not had that many Republicans in the House since Babe Ruth was swinging a baseball bat. There was a surge of high and euphoria that everybody's like, wow, this is awesome. And so we had elections within the party to see who the nominees would be. And I ran for oversight chair and got it. Wasn't supposed to get it, but I got it. Rob Bishop ran to become the chairman of oversight, or of the natural resources, and got it. Speaker Boehner stood up for re-election, and nobody ran against him. Now, just before the election in January, where you go up and then the Democrats can nominate who they want, and anybody from the floor can nominate somebody else, about 3 days or so before that, maybe it was 2 days, you heard the name Louis Gohmert. I like Gohmert. He's a nice guy. Do you know how many votes Louis Gohmert got for Speaker? 3, including his own. He voted for himself and only 2 others. Let that be a little bit of indication that for those of us that have served, that maybe he wasn't prime time to be Speaker. We had another guy who people said, oh, what about Webster? Webster out of Florida. You know, if you look at some of the ratings, believe me, I got a real problem with the rating system, but if you look at the ratings, he was scoring like in the 50th percentile. Boehner's in the 70s. I'm in the 90s, okay? I mean, we got a difference here. But he was much more of a moderate than Boehner ever was. But let me tell you about when I first got to Congress. Because when I first got to Congress, you know, I'd beaten a 12-year incumbent, pledged I was going to do things differently. And I met with John Boehner. Then he wasn't the speaker, but I'm going to refer to him as the speaker. I said, Speaker, I don't know what I don't know, so tell me what I need to know. And he said, most important piece of advice I can give you is you can disagree, just don't be disagreeable. That is the single best piece of advice I've ever heard in Congress. Disagree, but don't be disagreeable. And I said, John, what can a guy like me survive in this town? I pledged to go against earmarks. Everybody. Remember, our whole delegation was pro-earmark. Orrin Hatch is the one that took me on in the Salt Lake Tribune front page story. Quote was something like, if you don't ask for earmarks, you're not doing your job. And I've been in Congress like a month or something. I mean, a very short period of time. And I said, John, can a guy like me survive not asking for earmarks? He said, you know what, I've never asked for an earmark. I'm doing just fine around here. And if we're fortunate enough to get in the majority, it's one of the first things I'm going to do. And you know what? He did it. You know, if you're the speaker, the power that you have is to hand out the political candy to get votes to come your way. You're having to struggle with the vote, you can go up to this gentleman and say, all right, what do you need? I need a yes, what do you need? And he'll say, well, you know, I need this bridge. All right, what do you need? You know, you can start going, and pretty soon, they use earmarks to drive the, and you know what? It took away probably his single most powerful tool. He got rid of it himself. And I appreciated that about it. Here's the other thing last thing I'll tell you about the Speaker Boehner. Oh, 2 years ago or so, I went up to him and I said, you know, since day one, I've been focused on oversight and government reform. That is my passion. It's what I'm focused on. I said, I just need to know it's going to be a fair fight. If you're going to do this based on seniority, you know, I'm not your guy because I don't have seniority. But I got tenacity, I got know-how, I got focus, I got drive, I got all the other things that you're going to be looking for in an oversight chairman, but I don't have seniority. He said, no, you go fight for it. You earn it. You got to win it though, but you'll get your fair shake. And I kind of checked off with him every 8 weeks or so. I was running against a gentleman who had been there for 24 years. Another one's been there 16 years. Another person had been there, I think, 4 years longer than I have. It's only the 5th time in 90 years that somebody who served 3 terms has ascended to become a committee chairman where you set the agenda. I get unilateral subpoena authority. You know, you get some power there that you don't have as a rank and file member. And true to his word, I tell you, I would not be in this position if he really fought against me. And here's probably the most important point that I want you to know. I want you to Google this when you get home. 12 thorns in the speaker's side. 12 thorns in the speaker's side. This is a couple of years ago, but Politico, I think it was, or one of the Capitol Hill newspapers did a thing. 12 thorns on in the speaker's side. I was one of the 12. Said something like 9 out of 10 things that speaker was important to, I voted against him. And you know what? I appreciate it about him. I am consistently in his grill telling him I disagree. And trying to make the argument. We win some of those. PILT payments and other things I can point to that where we've had success. Sometimes we lose them. But I do appreciate that about Speaker Boehner. And I do think he's a good man. And I totally disagree with his tactics on some issues. Totally disagree with him on some others. And I do think that there'll be a variety of people that run next time.
I just have a follow-up question to that. My understanding of the function of the election is that all they needed were enough people to vote for somebody else. It didn't need to be somebody nominated, and it didn't need to be somebody who wins. Once there are other people nominated and somebody doesn't get the majority, then anyone can be nominated, and you could have found a good leader.
Anybody could have been, you can nominate on the floor, and that's what happened. I mean, the way it works, it's very different than any other vote. They go person by person, they call your name out, and then you kind of yell out who you vote for. The rule is based, as best I understand it, the majority of people who are present. So it depends on how many people are in the room.
Absolutely.
And clearly, it wasn't even close. The majority of the people voted for John Boehner. Now, Nancy Pelosi gets a whole set of them, but would have a difficult time getting over that threshold. But keep in mind, being Speaker.
The answer that I got from your office was, we don't have anyone else nominated that is worthy of the position.
Well, I think that's very true. I wouldn't take, yeah.
Whereas
Who would you have put up there?
What I'm saying is, as a group, you could have gone to caucus and found a leader within the whole Congress.
I know, and I got to tell you that John Boehner had built a lot of support from a lot of people out there. I think there were a lot of people that did anticipate that Eric Cantor was going to challenge him, but Eric Cantor lost his primary. That changed the whole dynamic. Totally changed the dynamic. I'm happy to entertain any suggestions you might have, but there are some good people that I think could have perhaps run. A guy like Paul Ryan. Paul's like, I'm not doing this. I do not want to be the Speaker of the House. It is a very, very difficult and demanding job. It is, I mean, you are on the road every single day.
So you're saying there's no one else that would have done it?
I think there are a lot of people that would be very good speakers. I'm just telling you, it takes more than just, there are a lot of good people in Congress. I love Trey Gowdy. I love Rob Bishop. I like Paul Ryan. I mean, these are all people that I could support if they would run. And that's, you got to understand, it's a different thing to, you take this whole room full of people, you got to find somebody who's willing and wanting to sacrifice their lives and their family and everything else to do it. And at that time, we didn't have anybody else. And
but with an opportunity, I feel like you could have found somebody better than Boehner. And that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think the point about how come nobody ran against Boehner is a very legitimate point. But in context, what I'm just trying to say, it looks clearer now. If we could see the world now, but much muddier, people probably would have said, hey, yeah, let's, I think I could take him on and win.
I think we thought Boehner was
But-
doing a better job than he is.
Well, yeah, it's part of the problem.
Yeah.
But once that vote was taken and there wasn't a majority, there would have been time.
But there was a majority on the first vote.
You could, exactly. But
Right.
I'm saying it could have changed if we had had some congressmen willing to say, yeah, there are better leaders.
Yeah, you're right. I'm not arguing with that point. I'm just saying, you got to remember the context. This election happens a week after the election. And when we have this huge majority, people are feeling good about the victory we just had. I don't say it's right. I'm just saying, I'm telling you about the political dynamic that's in the room. I think the idea that should somebody have stepped up to challenge him and mount a campaign, they maybe could have prevailed. I don't think so, but they might have been able to. But nobody did that. Nobody did that.
I guess I wanted your opinion on, should the president have the authority to kill suspected terrorists because he deems them necessary through executive action?
Yes, I do.
Yes. Even
I think
if,
the president...
if you don't trust, I mean, who knows, maybe I could be a suspected terrorist.
Outside of the United States, yes, I do.
In the United States.
No, totally different equation. Totally different set of constitutional issues. Outside the United States, the president is the commander-in-chief. He is vested with that power, and as much as I dislike and frustrated and distrust the president, the current president, I think that power to that executive action, the power of the president to sign and stroke that pen and make that decision, it's a weighty one, but that's who America elects. And yes, I do think, outside of the United States, not if you're living in Orem, right? So, so yes, I do think that executive, and it happens, and the president has done this multiple times. In fact, he's I think rightly taking a lot of criticism because he's complained about some of these things, but boy, you light up a drone and he's more than willing to pull the trigger. And there's some, it's a really worthy debate. But I don't know who else you would have make that decision. I want the president to make that decision. He's got to pull the trigger. He's got to pull that trigger. But he doesn't have an enemy combatant policy. I mean, Cuba, I mean, the Guantanamo Bay, I mean, that's it's such a mess. Yes, sir.
To that end, we spend a lot of time arguing the Constitution, what we should do, what we shouldn't do. Part of the Bill of Rights gives the president that right, and to take that right away, you have to manipulate the Constitution, so we cannot take that right away. It's the same reason we can't take the 4 services and make them one. There's a bill that states the president has the right to put 30,000 Marines anywhere in the world at any time for up to 30 days. If we take that right away, we take that ability away, and then we have to wait on Congress and Senate to make that decision. So that executive order has to stay.
Yeah. Well said. I agree with that. Look, to me, there's a line there that deals with a clear and present danger. You have to be able to, if there is a clear and present danger to the United States of America, the president should absolutely react, take action immediately.
On American citizens.
No need. Well, overseas, okay, it's a different equation. It's pretty hard to go, check their papers when you've got intelligence that tells you this person is plotting to, blow up an embassy or blow up the United States of America or board a plane and that sort of thing, okay? That's why we encircled the president 24/7 with, so many people and aides and communications and Air Force One, and you got to make these decisions sometimes within a couple of minutes. And the president has to be able to do that. Now, I do think the president has made a mistake, and it's happened with other presidents, not just President Obama. But if you look at the bombing campaign that we did in Libya, that drives me nuts. Because there was no clear and present immediate danger to the United States of America. The president, he happened to be in Brazil at the time. I'm not faulting for being overseas, but he was in Brazil at the time, and he said, I got my authority from the United Nations. That's really what he said. It was just so fundamentally, totally wrong, absent of, I mean, it's just absolutely wrong. And for 8 months, and yeah, maybe, for 8 months, we bombed Libya. And look what it is now. It is a safe haven for ISIL, for these terrorists, the training camps that are going on. And keep in mind, I get to see some intelligence that y'all don't see. Chris Stewart gets to see it more. He is on the Intel Committee. Created this power vacuum. As bad as Muammar Gaddafi was, didn't really have a game plan after that. Certainly not that worked. That's going to be, I hope, if Hillary Clinton runs, that should be a big part of the election. Because she has that, have you seen that video of her talking about, oh yeah, you pull up this video, it'll make you sick. When she talks about Libya. So, anyway, yes sir. Well, I got two more and then we're out of time here, so yes sir.
Can I ask both of them?
That's one.
Can our country survive the massive national debt?
I'm glad you brought this point up. The question was, can the country survive the massive debt? If you spend $1 million a day every day, it would take you almost 3,000 years to get to 1 trillion. Okay? The debt has now grown to 18 trillion. It would take more than 50,000 years at $1 million a day. That doesn't even include the interest payments. We pay more than $600 million a day in interest. That's our daily interest payment. So, Democrats would argue, and I say this with some authority, in that I was on the Budget Committee and I asked Secretary Geithner, said the president's budget never pays down the debt. He basically said, you can pull up the video so you hear it in his own words, but he basically said that as long as the debt remains as a percentage of gross domestic product between, and I think it was 60 to 70, I could have those percentages wrong, then the debt is sustainable in perpetuity. And I beg to differ. I think there's going to be a day of reckoning if we don't show that we're going to responsibly pay down our debt. Somebody's got to pay it. And the answer is not just printing more money. What happens when you print more money? Inflation. What happens when inflation? You get less for your dollars. It takes more dollars. It's more dollars chasing fewer goods. It's the cruelest thing you can do to people on fixed income. It's the cruelest thing you can do to somebody who's trying to rise the ranks and or has debt. I mean, And inevitably, I think we're going to be headed that direction if you don't change the trajectory. So it's a great question. It's right, if you had to list what is the most important thing, debt and getting our military right. If we don't get those two things moving in the right direction, we're hosed. So let me get that gentleman back here, and then we'll, yes, sir.
I'd like to know what your position is on count my vote in Utah.
You always take one too many questions, don't you? Look, I've been opposed to it. I think the system works. I don't know what it is they thought they were trying to fix. But it is what it is. You know, anything I say, and people say, oh, you got a vested interest because you're in office and all that. I didn't see a need for it. I don't know what it really, truly solves. I mean, think about this. If you go to the primary, and if you go to the general election, we have some of the lowest voter turnout percentages. I mean, it's embarrassing how few people come out and vote. What I like about the convention caucus system is we regularly get in excess of 95% of the people that run to be their representative. We're a republic, okay? It's not a democracy. People got to understand this. The form of government here is a republic. You get together this group of people in their neighborhood, they're going to elect this gentleman right here to represent their interests, and he better darn well represent all these people and listen to their input and make the very best decision he can. What's wrong with that? Especially when you get more than 95% of it, because you take all these elections, all these candidates, there is nothing more frustrating than getting to the voting booth and thinking, I don't have big name ID, and I don't have big dollars, so I can't win. And that's the avenue, that's the path that they created with Count My Vote, is you want to bypass having to talk to people, you want to bypass having to talk about issues, let's see who can throw up the most money, who can throw up the most 30-second ads. That's not what it should be about. It should be about, look, I took on a 12-year incumbent Republican, okay? Well-seated, well-funded. I had no campaign staff. You couldn't pronounce the word Chaffetz. You know, you still can't. Yeah, still can't. He said, still can't pronounce it. You know, let alone spell it. We did no polling, and we had good people like, you know, Del and Connie Smith here and Kelly who stepped up and helped. And Matt, where's Matt? I saw Matt sitting back here. Matt Barber, you know, it took time to go out and build these relationships and convince people, look, I will do what I say I'm going to do, and earn their vote. And in the old process, if you will, you had to go out and earn these votes. And somebody who didn't have big name ID, didn't have big dollars, didn't have the resources, could go out and make the case on the issues. It's the only way you can prevail. But now this, well, no, you wouldn't have to do that. You wouldn't have to go down to Richfield, for goodness sake, and go talk to 3 people at 7:30 in the morning like I did one trip. I literally drove from Alpine down there, middle of the winter, talked to 3 people, drive home. Well, you know what? I think I was demonstrating, I had it in my gut that I was going to work my butt off. And, but no, I wouldn't want to do that. I just want to buy some ads, put them up on KSL, we'll be good. Yeah, we'll be good. We'll take on Mike Lee, that's what we'll do. It's really what it comes down to. So, anyway, listen, I don't know how I stayed awake so long. I haven't even had a Diet Coke, so maybe this ambulance can follow me home because I don't want to. It is truly an honor and privilege to serve. I appreciate you coming out here. I think this first part of the program is probably the most important thing we do is bringing together a community and thanking people who serve. You know, they don't earn a whole lot of money. It is boring as molasses day in and day out, and then all of a sudden when it hits the fan, they do some miraculous things. And it is a team. You know, I asked the chief, I said, do you want to call out the people that were there turning the car? And he said no. He said, this is top to bottom, this is a team effort, and that's not what we do. And I think he was right. And proud of it. Inspirational story, and you should be proud of what happened there. I am, and I thank you for allowing me to serve. For those of you that served our nation, I do serve our nation, particularly in the military, National Guard, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, you name it. Thank you. Thank you for your service. And thank you for allowing me to serve. I appreciate being here. God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.